It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when I left Quantico after a long day at the bureau. I was dressed casually, hoodie, jeans, and a ball cap. Nothing flashy, just comfort. My badge and firearm were tucked securely away, and I was headed home, thinking about nothing more than the leftover spaghetti waiting in my fridge. As I turned onto a quiet road in a Virginia suburb, I noticed flashing lights in my rearview mirror. A local patrol car. I pulled over immediately, hands on the wheel, window already rolling down. No sudden moves, standard protocol. The officer approached with a smug grin, hands lazily resting on his belt. He didn't introduce himself, didn't explain the stop. He looked me up and down and chuckled. Well, he said. Where you off to in such a hurry, sport? I wasn't speeding, officer, I replied calmly. Is there a reason for the stop? He leaned closer, scanning my car interior. Driving a bit too nice of a car for someone dressed like you. Mind if I take a look inside? I raised an eyebrow. Do you have probable cause? His smirk widened. We'll see about that. The officer's tone shifted slightly, but the arrogance lingered like smoke in the air. I'll need to see your license and registration, he said sharply, already reaching for his flashlight though it was still broad daylight. I handed over my documents without hesitation, keeping my hands visible. I'd been on the other side of stops like this too many times not to know how quickly they could escalate. He glanced at my license and scoffed. Derek Mitchell, huh? DC address. What brings you all the way out here? Work, I replied flatly. What kind of work? He pressed, narrowing his eyes. Federal, I said simply, not offering more than necessary. That irritated him. He clearly didn't like vague answers. He looked at my license again, then at me, and chuckled under his breath. Let me guess, you're a consultant or something? Something like that, I replied, still calm. He straightened up and walked back to his patrol car without another word. A minute later, he returned, more agitated than before. Step out of the vehicle, he ordered. I sighed. Am I being detained? Step out. Now. I slowly unbuckled my seatbelt and got out, hands still visible. He didn't pat me down, but he stood close, too close, chest puffed like he was trying to assert dominance. You fit a description, he said. Suspicious activity reported around here. Really? I asked. And what was the description? He blinked, hesitated, then shrugged. We'll sort that out once backup gets here. Backup? That was when I realized he was trying to make a scene. The officer leaned against his cruiser, arms crossed, acting like he'd just cornered a major suspect. I stayed calm, watching him out of the corner of my eye while keeping both hands visible. Within minutes, a second patrol car pulled up. Another officer stepped out, glanced at me, then walked over to his colleague. They spoke in low tones, but I caught fragments. Doesn't add up, no warrants, too clean. Still, they didn't release me. I'm going to need you to pop the trunk, the first officer demanded. Without a warrant? I asked. He smirked. You can either comply, or we'll impound the car and search it at the station. That's when I decided I'd had enough. Without a word, I pulled my wallet from my back pocket and flipped it open to reveal my credentials, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Right next to it was my badge and ID. Silence. His face changed instantly. The second officer leaned in to get a better look and visibly recoiled, stepping back as if the leather itself burned. You're FBI, the first officer stammered, his earlier confidence cracking. Yes, I said. Supervisory Special Agent, assigned to Washington Field. And you've just profiled, detained, and threatened a federal agent who has committed no offense whatsoever. The first officer went pale. I didn't know. You didn't say, I don't have to. You had my license. You had access to the database. You could have checked. But you didn't want to. You wanted a show. He looked like the ground might open up beneath him, the silence between us stretched long and thick. The second officer stepped back, trying to distance himself from the situation, clearly realizing this had gone too far. But the first one, the arrogant one, was frozen, his mouth half open like he couldn't decide whether to apologize or defend himself. You had my license, I repeated. You ran my tags. You chose not to check the system. Instead, you assumed. You escalated. You mocked. Look, Agent Mitchell, this is all just a misunderstanding, he said, his voice suddenly softer. You have to understand, we deal with, I cut in. Don't try to justify what just happened. You laughed when you pulled me over. You tried to intimidate me. And when I didn't play along, you called for backup and tried to make it worse. He didn't argue. He couldn't. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, and calmly took a photo of his name tag and badge number. Then I turned to the second officer and did the same. Neither of them tried to stop me. This will be reported, I said flatly. Not just to your department. Internal Affairs. The Bureau keeps a record of every unlawful stop involving agents. I hope you understand how serious this is. The second officer nodded quickly, visibly sweating. The first one finally looked down, defeated. I turned back toward my car. If I'm free to go, I'll be leaving now. They didn't say a word. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away without another glance. But I knew they'd be talking about this one for a long time. The drive home was quiet, but my thoughts were anything but. I'd dealt with difficult situations in the field, dangerous stings, high-stakes arrests, even interagency turf battles. But this? This was different. This wasn't just about me being a federal agent. It was about what could have happened if I hadn't been one. What if I didn't have that badge? What if I were just another citizen, pulled over and pushed around because someone let their ego take the wheel? The incident rattled me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I was scared, but because I knew how easily this kind of thing spiraled for people who couldn't flash a badge and flip the script. By the time I got home, I'd already typed out my report, factual, concise, and damning. Names, badge numbers, time of stop, duration, behavior, language. I attached the photos. It was already being forwarded to the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility and shared with local oversight. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted accountability. A few days later, I got a call. Internal Affairs from their department wanted a statement. The officer had already been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Apparently, I wasn't the first complaint. Just the first one they couldn't dismiss. And that was enough for now. Because sooner or later, arrogance always meets the one person who won't back down. A week later, I received an official email from the department's Internal Affairs unit. The officer who had stopped me, Officer C. Reynolds, was under formal review. They had pulled body cam footage, dispatch logs, and GPS tracking to verify everything. According to the investigator, there were multiple inconsistencies in Reynolds' report, including fabrications about why I was pulled over. They didn't just lie, they tried to cover it up. I wasn't surprised. But I was satisfied. A few days after that, I got an unexpected call from the police chief himself. He offered a carefully worded apology, one that I could tell had gone through legal before reaching me. Agent Mitchell, I want to personally extend our regrets for the way the situation was handled. We hold our officers to a high standard, and what happened to you was unacceptable. I let him speak. Then I told him calmly, you should be extending that apology to every person who's dealt with Reynolds and didn't have a badge to protect them. He was quiet for a moment, then said, we're reviewing his prior stops. If there's a pattern, we'll act accordingly. Good, I replied. Because it's not just about how your officers treat federal agents. It's how they treat everyone. Before we hung up, he asked if I wanted to press further. file a formal complaint with state prosecutors. I said no. I wasn't looking to ruin a career. I was looking to expose a broken habit. The Bureau thanked me. Internal Affairs thanked me. But the best message came weeks later, when I got an anonymous email from someone in that department. It read, "Thanks for standing up. Reynolds made a lot of people feel small. You reminded him that no one's above accountability." I smiled. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's quiet. But it echoes. About a month after the incident, I received a letter in my bureau mailbox, no return address, handwritten. It was brief but powerful. "You don't know me, but I saw what happened that day. I was the car behind you, the one that turned off when backup showed up. I didn't have the nerve to stay. But I wanted to. Thank you for doing what I couldn't." I read that line twice. I hadn't noticed anyone behind me at the time. My focus had been entirely on de-escalation, procedure, control. But someone had seen it. And that someone had been affected enough to reach out, even anonymously. That told me everything I needed to know. What happened that day wasn't just about me. It never had been. It was about people who get dismissed, ignored, or silenced simply because someone else thinks they can get away with it. The letter reminded me why I joined the Bureau in the first place. Not for power. Not for recognition. But for protection, for the idea that the law isn't just a weapon, it's a shield. A few days later, I followed up with the Internal Affairs investigator. Reynolds had been officially terminated. And his partner? He requested a transfer to a quieter division, far away from traffic stops. Funny how quickly roles change when the mirror is held up. Weeks turned into months, and life returned to its usual rhythm. But the echoes of that stop never truly left. One afternoon, during a multi-agency training seminar at the Bureau, a young recruit approached me. Nervous, respectful. "Agent Mitchell," he asked. "You're the guy from the roadside stop, right? The one who got pulled over?" I nodded, surprised. He straightened his posture. "They talked about it during orientation. Said you handled it by the book. That you didn't escalate. That you held the line." I raised an eyebrow. "They teach that now?" He nodded. "They use it as a case study, for restraint, protocol, and how to deal with bias without lighting a match." That hit me harder than I expected. What started as an ordinary drive home, just me, the road, and a badge tucked in my wallet, had become a quiet blueprint for others. A reminder that standing firm doesn't mean losing control. That calling out injustice doesn't require shouting, it requires courage. I looked at the recruit and offered a simple reply: just do your job right. Protect people. Even when it's hard. Especially then. He nodded again, eyes wide. As he walked off, I realized something profound. That roadside encounter wasn't just a moment, it was a message. And if even one young officer remembered it before letting arrogance take over, then it was worth every second. A year later, I was invited to speak at a regional law enforcement ethics summit. The topic was authority, assumptions, and accountability. I was hesitant at first. Public speaking wasn't my favorite part of the job, but I knew I had something worth sharing. I stood at the podium in front of a room full of officers, cadets, and agency heads. Some were seasoned, others fresh out of the academy. All of them were listening. I told the story, not with drama, not with anger, but with clarity. I walked them through every step: the smirk, the unnecessary backup, the silent power of a badge revealed too late. And then I asked them the same question I'd asked myself that night: what if I hadn't been FBI? You could hear a pin drop. I didn't shame them. I didn't grandstand. I just laid out the facts, let the silence do the rest. Afterward, dozens approached me. Some shook my hand. Others thanked me. One older officer pulled me aside and said, "I've been doing this 20 years. I thought I'd seen it all. But you made me see myself. That moment stuck with me. Not because I had changed the world, but because I'd changed one mind, and that's how everything starts. A few months later, I got an email from the same department where Officer Reynolds had worked. It was from a new lieutenant who'd recently been promoted after a department-wide restructuring. He wrote, "We've implemented new training protocols based on what happened with you. Bias awareness, procedural audits, and mandatory review of every traffic stop that escalates without clear justification. I thought you should know, you made a difference." That hit me hard. Not because I wanted praise, but because change, real change, is rare. And this? This was tangible. This was policy, not just apology. It reminded me of something my mentor once told me back at Quantico: sometimes, the quietest revolutions come from a single voice that refused to stay silent. I never expected to be that voice. But here I was, proof that staying calm under pressure doesn't mean surrender. It means strategy, strength, purpose. And while Officer Reynolds might have laughed the day he pulled me over, he wasn't laughing now. Neither were the dozens of officers who'd quietly been learning from that mistake. As I shut my laptop and looked out the window of my office, I thought about all the people driving home that night, some of them just like I was that day, tired, quiet, hoping for peace. Maybe now, they had a slightly better chance of getting it. One evening, almost a year and a half after the stop, I ran into someone unexpected. I was at a quiet coffee shop just outside D.C., waiting on my order, when a man in plain clothes stepped up beside me at the counter. I recognized him immediately. Officer Reynolds. He looked different, no badge, no uniform, no smug posture. Just a man carrying the weight of choices he couldn't undo. He glanced at me and paused, clearly debating whether to say anything. Then he did. "Agent Mitchell," he said, voice low. "Can I speak with you, just for a moment?" I nodded. I wasn't expecting anything, but I was curious. We stepped outside. He shoved his hands in his jacket pockets and avoided eye contact. "I lost my job," he started. That day, it stuck with me. Harder than I thought it would. I waited. No need to interrupt. I was angry at first. Blamed you. Blamed the department. But over time, I started realizing, it wasn't about that one stop. It was about who I had become behind that badge. That caught my attention. "I've been going to counseling," he continued. "Joined a community program. I mentor at-risk kids now. Not because I want to make up for it. I see things clearer now." I nodded slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just thought you should know, you changed more than just a policy. You changed me." For the first time, I saw sincerity in his eyes. No ego. No deflection. Just a man trying to be better. I offered him my hand. "Then don't waste it," I said. He shook it, firmly. Silently. And then walked away. As I watched Reynolds disappear down the sidewalk, I felt something I hadn't expected. Closure. Not just for me, but for the countless people who never got that handshake, who never heard the words, "I was wrong." The truth is, what happened that day could have ended very differently. It often does, for people without a badge, a title, or a backup plan. But what matters is what we do with those moments. How we respond. What we build after the dust settles. In the Bureau, we're trained to assess threats, manage chaos, enforce law. But no training manual prepares you for the quiet war of assumptions, of being treated like less than what you are until someone sees what you carry in your wallet. That stop taught me more than any field op ever could. It taught me that restraint is power. That silence can speak louder than shouting. And that justice isn't always delivered in a courtroom, it's sometimes handed off, quietly, in the form of policy change, reflection, or a handshake between two men who once stood on opposite sides of the badge. I never needed an apology. But I got something better, proof that accountability matters. That people can change. And that the line between power and abuse is razor thin, unless someone chooses to draw it clearly. And on that day, I did.